God gave his people 10 commandments, and right smack in the middle, in the heart of those commandments, are these words. Honor your father and your mother so that you may live long in the land the Lord your God is giving you. Jesus affirmed that command several times. The Apostle Paul said about that command, it is the first one with a promise that your life would go well if you honored your parents. So it's appropriate for us to say Happy Mother's Day and honor mothers. So to all the moms in here, we want to wish a happy Mother's Day to you. And Mother's Day can be a great time of celebration for the few of you who are going, uh-oh, it's Mother's Day. Our bookstore has some cards and gifts over there. You can slip out now and do that. I would like to save your life for you. Honoring mothers is a big deal, and it's a great privilege. And to stand up here today with all the children we had behind us earlier, it's just a fantastic thing. And Dinah and I are grateful for our kids, and we are adding to our family. Our daughter Chelsea is expecting their first on November 6th, and our daughter-in-law Brittany is expecting their first on November 7th. So bam, bam, right there in November. We're excited about that. One of the blessings is the chance we have to be grateful and to be thankful. But here's a mistake we make. We make a mistake if we think that the way we're seeing the world right now, how it's going for us, is how it's going for everybody else. Here's what happens to us. If it's snowing in our part of the world, we assume it's snowing everywhere in the world. That's just kind of how we live. But the truth is, while today is a great day, I also know that for some of you, today is a really hard day. Maybe for you, you've wanted to have kids and have been unable. Maybe you lost your mom recently, or you've lost a child. And maybe you had tough issues going on with your kids, and you're a bit estranged from them. Maybe your kids aren't responding the way you want them to respond. Maybe your mom was a really difficult person. And so for some, today isn't a good day. It's actually a painful day, a reminder of what you'd like to have that you don't have. We're in this series. We're finishing it today. It's not over, coming back from the difficulties of life. And maybe some of the difficulties have been that for some, Mother's Day is painful because our home was just a messed up, dysfunctional home, some kind of a broken home. We lived in divorce, abuse, rebellion, conflict, anger, a lot of different kinds of things that happen in our homes. And today, the home is changing rapidly. 3 million children in the U.S. live with their grandparents today. 43% of kids in the U.S. live without a dad in the home. 44% of people under the age of 30 have a step sibling. That's changed dramatically in the last few decades. In the 1970, 73% of children were in a home where there were two parents and it was their first marriage. That was 1960. In 1980, it was 61%. Today, it's 46% and declining. The fastest growing household in the U.S. today are single-parent households. In fact, in the St. Vrain Valley School District, there are over 7,000 single-parent households. Almost all of those are single moms. And one of the reasons our church chose to get engaged in the lives of single parents is because we recognize how demanding and challenging that is, and how much at risk so many of those homes are. And so we do a lot of stuff. Last night, in fact, over at the closet, which helps provide either gently used or new clothing for single families, they had a big Mother's Day celebration. For a lot of those moms, that was going to be the only way someone said to them, thank you, on Mother's Day. And let me just take a little rabbit trail for half a second. The Pearl Group that was birthed out of our church is intentionally about helping single parents in our area here, and they've got a couple of fundraisers coming up in the next few months, and I want to encourage you to get engaged because every dollar gets plowed back in to helping these single parents and particularly their kids, and we want to be engaged in that. It is a tough job. Divorce hasn't done what we hoped it would do. The rapid increase in divorce over the last 4.5 decades in the U.S. has created more issues than it's solved. And in fact, even secular researchers are saying today, it didn't do what we thought it was going to do. It didn't bring the freedom we thought. It didn't bring the happiness we thought. And it certainly didn't seem to minimize the issues going on in our homes. But of all the stuff that happens, The people most impacted, the people most affected are the kids in our homes. And the pain and the marks that get left and then unfortunately seem to replicate themselves down line has created all kinds of stuff for us. It is the kids who get impacted the most. Listen to the words of this song, a brother writing to his young sister as their home was coming apart. You know, family's complicated today, isn't it? We have blended families and part-time families and weekend families and summer families, and we have his kids and her kids and our kids and somebody else's kids from a previous relationship that float in and out. It is not easy today, and the assault on traditional family and the paths that we continue to plow down here in our country have created lots of chaos and lots of questions and a multiplicity of issues in our lives, just lots and lots of stuff. Diane and I recognize we are unusual among most of our friends. First of all, both sets of our parents are still living, celebrating over 55 for my parents, over I think 57 years of marriage for Diane's family. Diane and I have been married. In a couple weeks, we'll be celebrating our 35th anniversary, and we are unique among our friends in that way. There are lots of issues going on, and when we look at some of the things that are happening as marriage is being redefined in the U.S., what it means to be a family is being redefined, and there are lots of things we ought to be concerned about and engaged in and paying attention to. Sometimes we catch ourselves saying, man, look at all this bad stuff happening, and if we could just rewind the clock, things would be better. Is it just us now that are experiencing this kind of stuff? Or homes are disrupted and lives are messed up and people make such poor choices? The truth is, it's been going on for a long time in the life of the family. If you take your Bibles and you go back to the very first family, we get their story unfolding in Genesis chapter 2. You have Adam and Eve. You remember they're with God. They're being blessed by God. And they're enjoying this opportunity to be with Him. And he says to them, there is just one thing. There is this one tree, and the fruit of that tree we don't want you to eat. Stay away from that. We don't know how long, but eventually they cave in, and we have Applegate going on there where they're blaming each other for what happened, and it wasn't their fault. They have two sons. The sons get jealous. One of them murders the other and disappears from home. Cain, the first picture on a milk carton as a runaway. Fold over just a couple more chapters, you get to Noah. You remember Noah, the one who rescued his family from the flood and brought all those animals on the ark, and there they were in this boat, and I imagine that was pretty stressful. Confined with your family for that much time, that would be stressful, wouldn't it? And then you got the stench of all these animals, and when they land, and they're on dry land, and things are finally resolved, Noah gets drunk and gets naked, and his son mocks him and shames him, and Noah, upset, curses his son and casts him out of the family. And my guess is that year's Thanksgiving was complicated for them. Abraham and Sarah. If you go on just a little further in the book of Genesis, you read about their story. The father of the nation of Israel, Abraham, was promised by God that he was going to have more descendants than the grains of sand on the seashore or the stars in the sky. And yet here are Abraham and Sarah, and they don't have a child yet. How could they possibly have all these descendants? And so they take matters into their own hands. And Sarah comes to Abraham and says, I want you to sleep with my servant Hagar. And Abraham, like every boneheaded guy in the world, goes, okay. And then when they did have their own child, the disruption that happened in that household and the conflict that raged between those two boys, we're still experiencing generations later. International leader Joseph, the youngest of 12 brothers. We don't know how many sisters particularly. Not all the same dads. And Dad, in that boneheaded fashion, didn't even know how to not display his favoritism toward the youngest. And so it was obvious to everybody that Joseph was the favored kid. And his brother's jealous, envious. A couple of them say, let's kill him. And a couple of others say, no, hey, let's sell him. Some of you have wanted to sell a sibling, haven't you, along the way? And then there's this reconciliation out of this messy household. One of my favorite passages in Scripture, one of my favorite verses is when Joseph says to his brothers, what you intended for harm, God used for good. You hear what Joseph is saying? Hey, regardless of the story and regardless of how it unfolded and regardless of the choices, God ended up using that in a way that was a blessing for others. Flip over to the next kind of chapter. You get to 1 Samuel. You hear David's story. We know about David. Wrote the book of Psalms, such terrific words for us. David became king. He had everything he wanted. He had a summer palace and a winter palace. He had power and prestige. And one night he's out walking along his palace terrace, and what he sees is one thing he doesn't have, which is this woman taking a bath a couple homes away, and he sends for her, and she gets pregnant. In an effort to cover the pregnancy up, he has her husband killed. He takes her into his home. Their son dies, and there is discord in David's home from that day forward. Dysfunction that's hard to picture. It doesn't seem to get any better in the New Testament. It's still just as messy. You have a young couple. They're engaged to be married. She gets pregnant. She keeps convincing him, I have no idea how this happened. They give birth. They have other children. Not all warm and fuzzy like we kind of want to picture it. Here's what the Bible says about that. John chapter 7. After this, Jesus went around in Galilee, and he didn't want to go about in Judea because the Jewish leaders there were looking for a way to kill him. He's in his own home area, and he's gaining popularity. But in Judea, the Jewish leaders are already wanting to do away with him. When the Jewish festival of Tabernacles was near, Jesus' brother said to him, leave Galilee and go to Judea. You're going to get killed there. It's good for us. Go to Judea so that your disciples there may see the works you do. No one who wants to be a public figure acts in secret. Since you're doing these things, why don't you show yourself to the world? For even his own brothers didn't believe in him. Conflict in the home, dysfunction, messy. And difficulties in our home go a long way back. I love how Rick Warren says it. He says, when one sinner marries another sinner and they have sinnerlings, there's bound to be trouble in the house. Isn't that true? You and I get to choose a lot of stuff, but here's one thing we did not get to choose. We did not choose our parents. And some of you had a phenomenal home. It was warm and encouraging. And some of you had a difficult home, maybe an abusive home or an angry home, or some of you had homes that stayed together and you just have terrific relationship, and others of you, your home, it came apart and there's such dysfunction. For some of you, you found a home that was warm. Others found one that was cold. Some was boring. Others were funny. Homes are different. I'm grateful for the home I grew up in, but both my parents changed a pattern that existed in their home. Some of you have these warm, fuzzy memories of your grandmother sitting there baking cookies, reading stories. I remember with my grandmother, when she would send me down to the corner to buy beer for her with a little note, let Ricky buy the beer, and they would. I bring it home. We were sitting out in front of her home one day on the porch. It was an evening, and one of her neighbors went walking by, and my grandmother said to this woman, you think you're something special? I slept with your husband last week. That was what I experienced. I'm my grandparents, and I'm so grateful that my parents decided they were going to do something different. They were going to change a pattern. Last weekend, Diane and I took our two oldest granddaughters, Bree and Addie. We went down to a hotel near Denver and just did the pool and hanging out and having fun. And Bria over here on the left, we were talking about stuff with our family and their sister Sadie, how much fun she is, and the new one that's coming. And Bria made this comment. She said, we have the best family. And I thought, wow. And then I said to her, but you haven't met everybody yet. Families are messy, aren't they? Because we're messy. We're busted and broken. Every home is broken, actually. Let me give just a few observations. No homes are perfect. Yours isn't either. No matter what image you try to give, no matter how you try to put that Van Trapp family thing together, it's no home. No home is perfect. Because all of us have stuff. The Apostle Paul captured it in 12 words. Here's what he said. For all have sinned and we fall short of the glory of God. All of us are busted, he said, and we don't measure up. We don't come anywhere near what God would have for us. Now, some of you have experienced some really bad stuff, some abuse and neglect, and it's marked your life, and I don't want to minimize that in any way. But the truth is, we get to choose whether we're going to be anchored to our past or if we're going to move forward to a future. I'm not an expert at all, but my experience is selfishness is our biggest problem in our homes. I want what I want. I want to be happy. I want something new. I don't like how this is going. I don't feel good about it. I want to do what I want to do, and so I make choices that end up being bad. What I've experienced, Diane and I have had a great relationship, but I know things really shifted into another gear for us when let me just speak to the guys here, because I think when I decided I was not going to be so selfish. You have no idea how much she improved after that. And we live in a time when there's such saturation about being selfish, isn't there? I mean, how many of you took selfies this week? Right? Look what I'm doing. Look where I'm at. Look what I have. Who cares? I don't. I told you a couple of weekends ago, the Kings, Kevin King on our staff, they woke up early Sunday morning to a fire in their home, and listening to their story about that, they're going to be out of their home for another 6 to 8 weeks, and grateful that it wasn't any worse than it was, but there they were. If you remember that Sunday morning, it was raining, and it was about 4:30 in the morning when they woke up, and so here comes the fire department, and they're running in their house with all their equipment, and there's smoke coming out of the back of the house, and Kathy, there was a young guy out there. He was in his early 20s. He was training to be an EMT, and he had showed up on the scene as well. And so he was there trying to kind of help out. And as all these people were running in, and the fire seemed to be toward the back of the house, Kathy asked if she could go, and she said, "Can I get some pictures?" And the young man, he's new, he didn't know. He kind of stumbled around for a minute, and he finally said, "Well, I guess, where do you want me to stand?" Yeah, my house is burning down and I want a picture of you. We are unbelievably selfish people, aren't we? Here's what happens. I allow my pride and my greed and my lust and my anger to get the best of me. And our homes come apart. You can't unscramble the egg once it's scrambled. The consequences are real. The issues are real. Our choices are real. Stuff that's happened is real. And I can work to make amends, and I can seek forgiveness, and I can try to bring some repair. But I get to choose right now how I'm going to go forward. And I can either continue to choose to feed all the ugliness in my life, or I can try to choose to feed the things that are more productive and positive in my life. The Apostle Paul described it this way, that there are two natures in us. We kind of got these two halves to ourselves. There is the half that naturally runs toward all the negative stuff in our lives and is self-seeking and self-serving. And then there is the half that God is designed to help us connect with, and that's to have Him engaged in our lives. Here's how Paul describes it. I want to read it from the Message. He says, "It is obvious what kind of life develops out of trying to get your own way all the time. Repetitive, loveless, cheap sex, a stinking accumulation of mental and emotional garbage, frenzied and joyless grabs for happiness, trinket gods, magic show religion, paranoid loneliness, cutthroat competition, all-consuming yet never satisfied wants, divided homes and divided lives." And he goes on and he ends that section. He says, and I could keep going because there is a whole lot of junk that flows down that river of selfishness. And he says, but God wants to engage in your life, and He wants you to help pick you some other stuff, and He doesn't leave you hanging. He actually gives you the power to do it. And He said, and you ought to find some of the fruit of His life in your life. And He describes that fruit in Galatians for us as love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control, all the things that I do not naturally gravitate towards. And so what do I feed? Because almost all the behaviors that spill out of our life didn't just happen. We were feeding it. A little bit, a little bit, a little bit. broken homes. All of them. Because we're all broken. Last Saturday was called the greatest day in the history of U.S. sports. In just a moment, we're going to share in communion. So I want to invite our ushers to go ahead and get in place and ready to serve us. And greatest day in the history of sports. Yeah, we had the Kentucky Derby was going on. I have a lot of friends in Louisville, and Kentucky Derby is this huge event, and it's this massive, big thing that goes on. And that was last Saturday. And last Saturday was the kickoff of the NFL draft. And, you know, that's a big deal unless you're a Buffalo Bills fan. It just seems to be getting worse by the moment there. But also then Saturday night, the fight of the century. One people have been waiting for almost a decade. Floyd Mayweather, Manny Pacquiao. And I've become a bit of a Manny Pacquiao fan because he's such a great person of faith and he does so many good things with his life that I've enjoyed following him a bit. And I told you we were with our granddaughters and Dinah. We were doing the little getaway thing, and I really wanted to see the fight. And some of my friends had ordered the pay-per-view, but I couldn't do that because I was with them. And so earlier in the day, while we were just taking a break, I Googled on my phone, and there was a sports restaurant, not far from the hotel where we were staying. And I said to Diane, I'd love to see the fight. And she said to me, oh, go ahead. But I knew that wasn't necessarily go ahead, right? And so we hung out with the girls and had a great time. And then we were just sitting and reading, and it was about 10 o'clock, 10:15. And I said to Diane, boy, I wonder how that fight's going. I'd love to see that. And she said, really, go ahead and go. And before she changed her mind, I was out, grabbed the hotel, out the door. And on the phone, I found this place, and I got there, and it was packed. I mean, it was packed. I couldn't park. I was parked like up in some grass area somewhere. And the restaurant, the sports bar had people standing, like 100 people outside looking through the window, watching the fight because of the restaurant, you couldn't get in any longer. So I got there just as it was starting. I watched the first round with 50 of my closest friends. We couldn't hear anything, but we could see it, you know. And then me, I'm always, confident enough. I went around to the front where the security was, and I said, any chance we could get in? And they said, no, we were sold out. At 5 o'clock, this place was completely sold out. I was wearing a black Under Armour kind of pullover shirt, and it was the same kind those guys were wearing. And one of them said to me, but hey, if you want to just stand here with us, which was kind of at the front door of this bar, and watch the fight, you can. There were two people standing. Well, I wanted to go inside where the action was, but I said, that'd be great, thanks. And so now I could see and hear, and several of you on the way out were showing me your wristband. I'll be back in a minute. It's okay, good. About the 8th round, when two wives walked up to me and said, we need to get in. Our husbands are in here, we think, and they were supposed to be home hours ago. Go ahead, go find them. Good luck. So if I saw you there, I was working security. Well, we know now after the fight, it was kind of disappointing if you're a Manny fan. We know now after the fight that he had a torn rotator cuff in his shoulder. And remember what his trainers now have said, that he tore it, but they thought it was healed back up and he would be okay. Didn't think it was as bad as it was. One other person said, well, we didn't want to expose a weakness before the fight, and we were afraid the fight would never happen again. And it was disappointing. And I thought, that's a lot of us. We got a torn rotator and we think it's okay. We try to fight and we can't seem to win because we don't want you to see the weakness. So we do everything we can to mask it. But here's the deal. Here's what I found in my own life. I can't fix this. I can't fix the hole in my heart. I can't fix the brokenness from my past. I can't fix some of the stuff about me that's wounded me. There isn't another person or a job or money or stuff or things that are going to fill that hole in my heart. God does, though. It's not over because he wants to do something. He wants to fill that empty spot in my heart. He wants to heal my hurts and wounds. He wants to help me get past my past. And that's why I love when we share in communion. Because communion reminds me of what God did for me on the cross. Christ's broken body, that bread that we're going to take in just a moment, that cup of juice that represents his blood that was shed for me on the cross, so that I could be healed. He is not inviting you to do this by yourself. The opposite of that. He's inviting you to invite him to help you heal. Let's share together in communion.